The first time Mary Whitfield named a child who would vanish, no one noticed. It was a small thing, the absence of sound where laughter usually sat, a chair left untouched at the breakfast table, the faint sense that something ordinary had quietly stepped aside. Mary noticed these things the way other children noticed birds or puddles, instinctively, without fear. On the morning of February 3rd, 1894, Mary refused to eat. Her mother stood at the stove, wooden spoon resting mid-air, watching her daughter stare at the far end of the table where the light from the window fell cleanly across an empty chair. "You're going to be late for school," her mother said gently. Mary didn't look away. "He won't be," she replied. Her mother frowned. "Who?" Mary blinked, as if surprised the question needed asking. "Samuel," she said. "He won't be late today." There was no drama in her voice, no mystery, just certainty. By sunset, Samuel Price was gone. Black Hollow was not a town that believed in vanishing. It believed in misplacement, in mistakes, in boys staying out too late or falling asleep in barns. It believed in explanations that allowed the world to remain orderly. When Samuel did not return home that night, his father assumed he'd wandered farther than usual. When midnight passed, the assumption turned into anger. By dawn, anger turned into fear. Men searched the woods with lanterns. Women gathered in kitchens, whispering prayers into cups of untouched tea. Someone rang the church bell too early, then stopped. Mary Whitfield sat on the front steps of her house and watched. When Mrs. Price ran past her, sobbing, Mary stood up. "He won't come back the same way," Mary said quietly. Mrs. Price did not hear her. That was the last time anyone would say Mary hadn't warned them. Mary was 9 years old, but she did not move like a child. She walked carefully, as if aware that the ground itself might change its mind. She listened more than she spoke, and when she did speak, people found themselves stopping what they were doing, not because her voice was loud, but because it landed. Her father once said Mary had the patience of an old woman and the eyes of someone who had already seen the ending. No one laughed at that after February. The second child vanished on a Thursday. Mary had said so on Tuesday. She said it in the schoolyard, standing near the fence while the other children argued over marbles. She watched them with an expression teachers would later describe as concerned but detached. "Don't play too close to the river tomorrow," she told Anna. Anna rolled her eyes. "Why?" Mary hesitated, then answered honestly, "Because you won't get the chance again." Anna laughed and ran off. On Thursday morning, Anna Cole's shoes were found by the riverbank. Nothing else. That was when the town stopped pretending Mary was guessing. If you're listening to this, subscribe, because this story only works if you stay until the end. Black Hollow turned inward. Doors locked earlier. Mothers walked children to school. Teachers counted heads more often than lessons required. Every disappearance tightened the air a little more, like a rope drawn slowly but deliberately. And always, Mary knew. She never shouted warnings, never begged, never cried. She would simply look at a child, sometimes for a moment, sometimes for longer, then turn away, as if she had already said goodbye. People began to ask her questions they didn't want answers to. Will it be my son? Can it be stopped? Why do you know? Mary answered the first two. She never answered the third. By the fifth disappearance, the town council met in secret. They did not discuss the missing children. They discussed Mary Whitfield. Some argued she was disturbed. Others said she was cursed. A few, the quiet ones, wondered out loud whether the town should be listening to her instead of fearing her. But fear has a way of choosing its own target, and Mary was small. That night, Mary sat in her room and wrote something for the first time. Not in a diary, not as a confession. She wrote a list. Names, dates, short notes beside each one. At the bottom of the page, she paused, pencil hovering. Then she added one final line. They will try to stop me before the last one. She closed the book and hid it beneath a loose floorboard. Outside, the church bell rang. Someone else was gone. Once at the start of the day, once before dismissal. Mothers waited outside the schoolhouse longer than necessary, pretending not to watch which children walked out and which ones didn't. Mary Whitfield noticed the way adults had started looking at her. Not directly. They looked past her first, then back again, as if checking whether she was still where they expected her to be. Some smiled too quickly, others avoided her altogether. A few watched her with something close to hope, a dangerous thing, hope, when you don't understand what you're hoping for. Mary felt it settle on her like dust. She did not brush it away. The sixth child was named Thomas Reed. Mary named him on a Sunday. She sat beside her mother in church, feet not touching the floor, hands folded too neatly in her lap. The sermon was about obedience, about trusting God's plan even when it hurt. Mary listened carefully, then leaned toward her mother. "He won't need new shoes," she whispered. Her mother stiffened. "Mary, don't." Mary nodded. She had learned when words were not welcome. On Tuesday afternoon, Thomas Reed vanished on his walk home from the mill. His shoes were found by the roadside, neatly placed, as if someone had taken care not to lose them. Black Hollow stopped asking if Mary was involved. They began asking how. The theories came quietly at first. Whispers traded in kitchens and behind barns. Someone said Mary must be sneaking out at night. Someone else suggested she was passing information to someone older, someone who could move unseen. A woman swore she'd seen Mary near the river the night Anna Cole disappeared. Mary had been asleep. Her mother knew that. But doubt spreads faster than truth when fear is hungry. Mary's father, Elias Whitfield, tried to reason with the town. "She's a child," he said at a meeting that had no official name but everyone attended. "You're talking about her like she's a storm you can predict. She's just noticing things the rest of us miss." "And why does she miss them?" a man demanded. The room went quiet. Mary sat on the stairs outside the hall, counting the gaps between voices. She knew when the question would be asked before it was spoken. She always did. Inside, someone suggested keeping Mary home from school. Someone else suggested keeping her inside altogether. No one suggested listening to her. If you're still here, subscribe, because this is where stories usually get rewritten. Mary began to change. Not outwardly, she still wore the same dresses, still braided her hair the same way each morning, but she stopped warning people days in advance. She waited until the night before, sometimes until the morning of. It wasn't cruelty, it was fatigue. Knowing something is coming is heavier than watching it arrive. When asked why she'd stopped speaking sooner, Mary answered honestly. "They don't want time," she said. "They want someone to blame." The seventh disappearance broke the pattern. Mary did not name the child beforehand. She was quiet all day, pale, distracted. She flinched at sounds that never bothered her before. When her mother asked what was wrong, Mary shook her head. "I can't see him," she said. That night, Jacob Miller vanished. The town noticed something else, too. Mary cried. Just once, and only for a moment. After that, people stopped pretending she was harmless. If Mary could know and still fail, then maybe she wasn't a warning at all. Maybe she was part of the problem. The word containment was used for the first time, not loudly, not officially, but once a word like that enters a room, it doesn't leave. Mary found her father sitting in the dark kitchen late that night. "You're afraid of me now," she said softly. Elias looked up, eyes red. "I'm afraid for you." Mary considered that. "They're the same thing," she replied. She reached into her pockets and placed something on the table, a folded piece of paper. Elias opened it with shaking hands. It was another list, longer than the last, and at the bottom, written smaller than the rest, "If they take me away, it won't stop." Outside, Black Hollow slept badly, and somewhere beyond the edge of town, something waited patiently for the next name. Black Hollow had never believed in locking itself in. Doors were for weather, windows were for light, neighbors were for watching out for one another. That had always been the order of things. Until the night every door was bolted, every lamp kept burning, and every prayer whispered too fast to mean anything. The town council did not announce the decision. They simply acted. By sundown, Mary Whitfield was no longer allowed to walk home alone. By moonrise, she was no longer allowed to walk at all. Her school desk sat empty the next morning, her slate untouched, her name still written on the board because no one had the nerve to erase it. Mary watched all of this from her bedroom window. She understood containment. The 8th name came without warning. Mary woke screaming, not the small, startled cry of a child from a bad dream, but a full, torn sound, like something had been pulled out of her chest too quickly. Her mother ran to her room, heart already breaking before she knew why. "I don't know where he is," Mary gasped. "I don't know where he's going." That had never happened before. Within hours, Samuel Price, age 9, was gone. This time, there were no shoes, no clues, no careful placement of anything, just absence. Black Hollow crossed an invisible line that day. Fear became permission. The preacher spoke of cleansing. The midwife spoke of unnatural gifts. The sheriff, a man who had once bounced Mary on his knee, spoke of protective custody. "She sees things," he said, "and things that see us might see through her." Mary listened from behind the parlor door. She learned something important then. Adults were not afraid of what she knew. They were afraid she knew without needing them. Her mother tried to fight. Her father begged. Neither mattered. On a gray afternoon that smelled like rain, Mary was escorted from her home by men who would not meet her eyes. She carried a small bag. Inside it were socks, a ribbon, and the folded lists she had never shared. They took her to the old infirmary on the hill, a building meant for fevers, not truths. The lock clicked softly behind her. Mary did not scream. She sat on the narrow bed and waited. If this story is pulling you in, subscribe now, because once the door closes, there's no going back. Something changed after they locked Mary away. The disappearances did not stop. They accelerated. 2 children vanished in 1 week, then 3. And something else happened, something far worse. Mary began to be wrong. She named a girl who lived. She warned of a boy who came home safely. At first, the town felt relief, then realization. If Mary's sight was failing, then whatever had been using it was adapting. Mary felt it too. The knowing didn't leave her. It fractured. Images came out of order. Names arrived without faces. Faces appeared without names. Sometimes she heard footsteps in her room at night, pacing slowly, patiently, as if something was practicing being human. "Stop," she whispered into the dark once. The footsteps stopped. Something breathed. The ninth disappearance broke the town. It was the sheriff's son. Mary hadn't named him. She had tried. The night before, she clawed at the infirmary door until her fingers bled, begging to be heard. She screamed the boy's name until her voice collapsed into sobs. No one came. In the morning, the bed was empty. By the evening, the town was silent, not grief-stricken, hollowed. They came for Mary at dawn, not to free her, to confront her. They dragged her into the infirmary's main room, lanterns shaking in their hands, faces tight with the hatred born of love lost too many times. "What are you?" someone demanded. Mary looked at them, really looked, and for the first time, she told the truth they had never asked for. "I'm not seeing the future," she said quietly. "I'm hearing it repeat." The room stilled. "It's been here longer than me," she continued. "It learns from fear. It takes faster when you stop listening." Someone laughed, sharp, broken. "You expect us to believe a monster did this?" Mary shook her head. "No," she said. "I expect you to believe you helped it." Outside, the wind howled against the hill. Inside, Black Hollow faced the cost of not listening to a child who never lied, only warned. And somewhere in the dark beyond the infirmary walls, something smiled without a mouth. The infirmary had a basement no one talked about. Not because it was forbidden, but because it was forgotten on purpose. Mary discovered it the fourth night after the confrontation, when the footsteps returned. This time, they did not pace. They descended, slow, careful, like something that had been waiting for permission. Mary followed the sound barefoot, her lantern shaking not from fear, but recognition. The steps ended at a narrow door behind the medicine shelves, a door older than the building. Black Hollow did not collapse all at once. It would have been easier if it had. Instead, it rotted slowly, the way wood does when water seeps in and no one bothers to dry it. From the outside, the town looked alive for years afterward. Children played again. Bells rang on Sundays. New families moved into old houses, unaware that the floors beneath them had once listened. But the ground remembered. It always does. In the weeks after Mary vanished, the disappearances stopped. That alone should have frightened them. But relief is louder than wisdom, and Black Hollow chose relief. The sheriff declared the matter closed. The preacher announced that prayer had prevailed. The town council quietly sealed the infirmary basement and poured stone over the entrance, telling themselves that burying knowledge was the same as burying danger. No one spoke Mary's name, not out of respect, out of fear that saying it might wake something. The first sign that Mary had not left came in spring. A boy named Thomas, born months after the last disappearance, began to speak too early. Not baby sounds, not guesses, names. He pointed at the ground when he said them. His mother laughed at first. Then she cried. Then she stopped letting him outside. By summer, there were more children like Thomas. Not many, just enough. They shared the same habits, the same silences, the same unsettling way of pausing mid-sentence, as if listening to something the rest of the world could not hear. And sometimes, when adults were not paying attention, they whispered songs no one had taught them, songs Mary used to hum. Black Hollow adapted again. It always did. Parents stopped correcting their children. Teachers stopped asking questions. Doctors learned to call it imagination. Faith learned to call it God. And the hill learned to wait. Years passed. Houses aged. Faces changed. Graves filled. The thing beneath the hill slept, not because it was gone, but because it was sated. Mary had not starved it completely. She had done something far more dangerous. She had contained it inside memory. But memory fades, and with it, the cage weakens. On the 20th anniversary of Mary's disappearance, a sinkhole opened near the old infirmary site. Not dramatic, just a soft collapse in the earth, like the ground exhaling after holding its breath too long. Workers sent to fill it reported hearing voices echoing up through the dirt. The report was dismissed. The hole was filled. A plaque was placed nearby, marking nothing specific. In remembrance, it read. Of what, no one could say. That night, a girl dreamed of a hill that opened its mouth. In the dream, a woman stood at the edge, older than memory, younger than guilt, holding the hands of children made of shadow. The girl woke screaming one word she had never heard before. Mary. Part 6. What Mary Became. Mary did not die beneath the hill. Death would have been mercy. Instead, she became distance. She became the space between thought and action, the hesitation before a step, the reason a name sometimes sticks in your throat for no clear reason. She learned how the thing beneath the hill listened, not with ears, but with expectation. It fed on being anticipated. It thrived when fear leaned forward instead of pulling back. So Mary did the opposite. She scattered herself. Every child who ever hesitated before walking into the woods alone carried a piece of her. Every parent who locked a door without knowing why carried a piece of her. Every unexplained feeling of don't carried her fingerprints. Mary became instinct, and instinct is hard to erase. But it hurt. Every moment of holding the thing back tore at her sense of self. She remembered fewer faces as years passed. Names slipped away. Even her own began to blur. What remained was purpose. Hold, wait, listen. The thing beneath the hill grew angry. Anger made it careless. That was Mary's advantage. Decades later, when Black Hollow barely resembled the place it had been, a construction crew uncovered something they were never meant to find. Iron bars, rust-eaten, bent outward. The pit was empty. The breathing was not. Mary felt it immediately. A tearing sensation, like a scream being pulled through her. The thing was moving, not leaving, expanding. It had learned something new. It no longer needed a single hill. Part 7. The cost comes due. The first disappearance outside Black Hollow occurred in a town 3 miles away. Then another, then another. Different names, same pattern. Children who spoke too much, knew too much, listened too well. Mary followed as best as she could, stretched thin across too many places, too many fears. She was no longer enough on her own. She needed witnesses. She needed listeners. She needed you. If you're hearing this story, you're part of it now. Subscribe. Stay. Because some warnings only work if they're shared. That is why the story survives. Not as history, as discomfort, as that feeling you get halfway through when you realize this isn't just a ghost story, it's a record. And records exist so mistakes don't get repeated or so they can be perfected. Black Hollow still exists on maps. The hill is still there. And sometimes, when the ground settles just a little too deeply beneath your feet, you might feel it. A pause, a hesitation, a child's voice far away counting carefully. Not names, never names, just making sure the thing beneath the world remembers it is being watched.